Today's video is a stacked deck. I've already made 10 from Batman Beyond, linked above and in the description. But to complete the royal flush, let's go all in and make King, Queen, Ace, and Jack. All of them were made before I started filming my work for this channel, so you'll see footage using the correct parts, but not necessarily for these recipes. Still, you'll see how I made them, so that's what matters. Let's deal out and start with Ace. Ace's recipe was always pretty obvious to me and could really only be one choice: TNBA Bane. No bluffing, from head to toe you can use only one figure to make this guy. If you recently bought a TNBA Bane to collect the animation cell like I did, this is a great way to use that figure. As simple as his recipe is, his paint and modifications will be too. Some of what needs to be done actually won't even need a Dremel. All you'll need is to heat up the parts and remove them. You can use either a heat gun, or my typical choice, to put something in front of a space heater for a few minutes. Do this for the right wrist cuff, belt, necklace, and venom cord. Now we can take a Dremel to remove the tank top, left wrist piece, and then remove any facial details. Smooth those out with any additional dremeling or sanding, and then we can open up the epoxy. Since we removed some pieces instead of dremeling, there'll be a tiny bit more sculpting to fill those areas in. Start at his waist, fill in his wrists, and then up on his neck. Add some epoxy on his face to give him that blank featured look, and that should be it. Again, Dremel on low and or sand anything that needs it, and you can move on to painting. Much like my Galatea last time, linked above, I'll be priming him with a white spray paint because it just makes sense. He only needs a black on top of that, but I'll sketch out the spade first before painting it. Hit him with some black on there and he's all wrapped up. From Ace we move down the suit to King. Similar to Ace, I really only had one body in mind for Mr. Walker, TNBA Batman. His head, however, needs to come from someone else. For a while I was thinking maybe a BTAS Gordon, but ended up going with Slade Wilson. Slade had the sharper face features and obvious facial hair similarities, so he made more sense. The last little garnish for his recipe will be a sword from Gods and Monsters Wonder Woman. Okay, let's get going on his modifications. King will have a similar amount of dremeling needed as Bane did for Ace. You can start to see why these four are all in one video now, right? Heat up and pop the belt off. Cut off Batman's gauntlet spikes with your disc Dremel. Dremel down his boots. And lastly, his symbol. Slade's head only needs some light dremeling. Take some hair off, as well as all of his ears. Time for his epoxy now. As with Bane, fill in any major gaps left from dremeling on his legs or chest. Then, we can shape his gauntlets to better match King's. Mix some epoxy up, roll it, cut it in half, and then place it on the top and on the bottom of the gauntlet. Push it down for the transition and then flare out the ends just a bit. Repeat that process on his other forearm and then move up to his head. For the head, we'll smooth out the sides where his ears were and then smooth over the top. Looking good! Now, what's missing here? About 5 rubber overlays. What do I mean? For any skirts or large add-on pieces that require maintaining flexibility and articulation and therefore shouldn't be sculpted, I've turned to sheets of neoprene rubber. Rather than waste any of this material, I like to start out by making a paper prototype to run through my trial and error attempts and make sure everything will fit together. Just wrap the paper around the figure to get an idea of how much you'll need, and then trace or make tick marks for the rough shape. Lay it out and connect your marks together to make your first pass. Keep doing this and trim as needed to refine the fit. That will work for his belt and shoulder sash, but his loincloth pieces and shoulder piece will start out as rough guesstimates and then cut out and test and try again. Once you're happy with the shapes, transfer them to your rubber sheet. If your rubber shapes are good, you can glue them on with its excellent Bob Smith super glue. It's by far the best super glue I've found for gluing rubber, and really anything. His head needs a crown now. Normally I would sculpt this on, but originally I had intended to keep it removable to be able to make casts of his head, but I have yet to do that. We'll make it the same way we did with the previous pieces of rubber. Draw out the shape on paper, make any refinements, and then translate it to the rubber. Glue it together and then onto his head. Okay, let's paint this guy up. Just like Ace, I'm going to start with some white primer to really get a jump on him. Unlike Ace, you will need 3 additional colors, and these will carry over to the next 2 figures as well. a red, a golden yellow, and a brighter yellow to simulate the cel-shaded shine of the gold. Start with any extra white that your primer didn't cover. Then paint his black neck and gauntlets, followed by the gold trim, gold crown, shoulder sash, and belt. His shoulder piece and loincloth are red, and then he has black eyes with red pupils and the golden color for his facial hair. His sword is simply a flat gray blade with a golden handle. He needs one more accessory for me to call him complete, for now. His exploding card. This is simply a tiny piece of Bristol board paper cut to size and black marker colored in on the negative space to form the skull. He obviously has a flying playing card, but I'll get to those at the end. For now, he's done. Next up in the flush, Queen. Queen's recipe was up in the air for a little while, but not because of her body, because of her head. Her body was pretty simple and it made sense to use a TNBA Harley Quinn. Her head, however, puzzled me until I realized that she looked more than a little like Lois Lane playing dress-up in a hat. That was all I needed to move on and start her modifications. Similar to King, she only has some mild dremeling needed. Dremel off Harley's white frills on her chest and on the back, and then dremel around her wrists to smooth those out. Lastly, take off the winged ankle pieces on her shoes, sand those areas down, and then we can start sculpting for her. While King's shoulder piece was rubber, I thought it might be easier to make Queen's out of epoxy. There's no reason you couldn't do rubber to match her husband though. Anyway, mix them up if you go that route and shape it onto both sides of her shoulders. Her headpiece definitely made sense to do an epoxy as well. Heat up and remove Lois's hair, and then add a block of epoxy shaped to taper from the top down. Lastly, her waist sash will be a combination of epoxy and rubber. I used epoxy to form the cloth around her waist and the knot that holds two rubber shapes glued underneath to form the part that hangs down on her right. She's all ready for priming and painting now. Same as before, prime with white, paint black on her chest and hat, black and red facial details, a gold shoulder piece, and red for her waist sash. She does have a much needed accessory too. Her cane came straight from a BTAS Riddler and only needed a repainted red ball and golden accents near the top. That takes care of her. And now we just need to look at Jack. Jack's recipe was also one that was fairly apparent to me right away. His frame is similar to Nightwing, and his face shape is very similar to TNBA Joker. Luckily, those two scale very well together, so that just leaves his accessories. He has throwing knives that resemble Deathstroke's hand knives quite perfectly, so those were settled easily. Let's see how we need to shuffle him up. At first glance, you may think you'll have a lot of dremeling to do to remove Nightwing's symbol, but it's much easier than that. You need to heat him up and pop the whole thing right off. Next, dremel some of Joker's hair off and you're ready for epoxy already. The first thing you want to do is fill in the gaps from his symbol on the front and the back. Next, Joker needs some much longer hair in the form of an old-timey bob. Once the chest is cured, you can add his gauntlets and belt. Once the hair is cured, add his crown. He too will need a couple of rubber additions like the last two members did. He has a full chest overlay that is like a mix of King's chest sash and shoulder piece, but in the shape of a diamond. Then his waist sash is just like Queen's, where we have the epoxy band and knot with the two rubber hangdown pieces. Glue those on and we can start painting. This shouldn't be any surprise by now, but he'll get primed with white and use the same 4 other colors. Black for his hair and belt, red and black facial details, red gauntlets and chest piece with gold accents, and a gold cel-shaded crown. Paint the knives like so, with the wonderful little highlight shading the blade. I chose to glue one knife onto his forearm and keep the other loose to throw for his pose. That knocks Jack out. Now, let's raise the stakes and the figures, with the only thing left to unite this family, their flying playing cards. What's a reference to poker without some actual cards? This one is pretty simple and straightforward. I made both sides in Photoshop and then printed both, cut them out, and glued them to a piece of Bristol board. The real trick comes in how you attach them to their stands. I have these stands that I bought a few years ago that have unfortunately since been discontinued. The nice thing that helped the Royal Flush Gang here was the addition of this piece to clip onto the stand to support the cards. It's small enough to be hidden by the whole card, and then your character gets waist clipped to stand on top, and no one is the wiser. Until now, that is. And now I've laid all my chips on the table. And there we have it, the The entire Royal Flush gang can join 10 and make Terry's life miserable. They all really have quite the shelf presence and are an immediate standout when you see them in my Batman Beyond collection. And that finishes today's video. Thanks for watching. Drop a like if you enjoyed it and subscribe for more monthly content like this and occasional shorts featuring tips or additional customs. Go ahead and leave any questions or requests for future characters in the comments below. Follow me on Instagram if you want to see more customs like these and all of my latest work. Join me next time as we honor an anniversary for someone without any honor at all. That's right, it's finally time to look at my favorite custom I've done so far, the main man, the legendary Lobo. He'll of course be joined by his captor, the Preserver. It's going to be a fun one, so you won't want to miss it. Check out the rest of my catalog of videos while you impatiently wait for that next one. Have a good one, and happy customizing!